Hi everybody. So for the discussion video for Module 3, what we want to focus on is the so-called paleo diet. This question of, is it really a good idea to adopt the paleo diet? And related to that, what types of foods are the healthiest? To begin the discussion is Anna Marin.
So what question really stood out to me is what foods are the healthiest? It's probably not one type of food that is the healthiest, but it's the combination of different foods that will determine whether you're healthy or not. And it's this balance between the combination that will contribute to good health. Very important components are your macronutrients, consisting of your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats. And actually, for your carbohydrates, you have fibers, which are complex carbohydrates, which is something you don't commonly think of. But you also have micronutrients, such as vitamins and minerals that you need. And if you are lacking one of these groups, it's actually really poor for your health. So excluding one group completely would not be beneficial. And this is actually something that we do commonly see in osteoarchaeology.
Yeah, that's indeed very true. Something that I picked up out of the discussion question was actually the paleo diet trend, which is of course a dieting trend at the moment. And something about this trend is that it actually doesn't take into account the huge diversity of foods that was eaten in the past. In the past, there were a lot of different populations living all over the world, each with their different diet. And in fact, there was a huge range in the foods that were consumed. So in fact, I think that there is not just one paleo diet. Another thing that I would like to point out is that there are things that we can say about the paleo diet, but there are also things we can't say. Some diseases don't show up in the bone, or they may show up, but we don't exactly know what they're caused by. We know there may have been a food shortage, but we don't know if it was a shortage of carbohydrates, of proteins, or of fats, or maybe even of all three. So what we can't say is definitely something we need to take into account when reconstructing past diets.
Yes, I completely agree. What we can see with our reconstruction of the diets of past people is a tremendous amount of diversity. Humans are tremendously adaptive species, and that holds true for what we eat as well. It's one of the reasons we're arguably the most successful species on the planet, because we can adapt to so many different environments, and we can adapt to eating quite a large range of different foods. And that includes the foods that not only constituted sort of the staple foods, so the regular food that was eaten day in and day out, but also foods that had a more supplementary nature but still could have conferred a very important micronutrient, or even foods that can be considered as fallback foods or emergency foods that were used only in times of really resource stress. With all of this, we see a tremendous range of foods that people in the past, as well as people today, are adapted to eat. So there are many different avenues through which one is able to achieve relatively good health, as long as we're getting enough of those macronutrients, enough carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. All three have to be consumed, as well as enough of those micronutrients. One activity that we think could be useful in terms of critically thinking about the paleo diet trend is to pick a past population that you find particularly interesting, the Aztecs or the Maya or the Vikings, and look at the osteoarchaeological research that's been conducted to reconstruct their dietary patterns. Look at what the data says about what they were eating, and then share that information with us on the online discussion forum. We think this point about there being a lot of diversity and about humans being very adaptive will come through in that discussion. Maybe with all of that information, we'll start putting together our own paleo diet.